Hi guys, today I'm going to be talking about how to use pfSense with ProxMox. Now, I had previously done some content related to pfSense on Windows, but I recently migrated off of Windows and Hyper-V to ProxMox, and I wanted to use something like ProxMox because it's open source and has a lot more configurability in terms of what you can do with it. So it was a little bit more powerful than what you could do with Hyper-V. So I put pfSense on it. And in doing that, I had to configure it to work with my existing network, which used a lot of VLANs and other things that were more idiosyncratic to my network. But I'm going to show you how to set this up in the most basic sense, but I'm also going to show you how to use VLANs as well. So let's just go over to ProxMox. I'm going to show you how to configure the network on ProxMox, and then I'm going to show you how to install pfSense on ProxMox to use that network setup. And I'll talk about when you would use VLANs and when you wouldn't use VLANs and what you'll have to do inside of pfSense to make this all work. So let's just go right over to ProxMox and start there. So I already have ProxMox installed. That's a pretty straightforward process. So I'm not going to walk you through how to do that. But what I'm going to show you how to do now is configure ProxMox networking to work with pfSense. Now, ProxMox networking is found on the node that you want to install pfSense on, and then you can go under System and then find Networking. Now, if you don't have anything else installed on here, you should see just two network adapters or whatever network adapters you have added to this. You need at least two for pfSense to work. pfSense needs one for your wide area network, which is probably your ISP, and then one for your local area network, which is going to be your LAN. And so if you haven't done anything else, you should see at least two. Now, I installed ProxMox on an old Dell desktop, which only has one network port. So I just bought one off of Amazon. I bought a NIC card off of Amazon for like $25, put it in the PCI Express slot and booted everything up, and it installed the drivers automatically. There was really no need for any additional configuration because ProxMox is based on Debian. It's got broad network support. So pretty much anything will work with it. Now, there, of course, are exceptions to that. But once you have the hardware installed, there's probably nothing else that you have to do, especially if it's a fairly popular hardware like from Intel or Realtek or one of the many other popular developers of chips for NIC cards. Well, once you have that installed, you should see two NIC cards, if nothing else. And we're now going to configure each one of these NIC cards separately. Now, one of these is going to be for the wide area network, so you need to know which one that is, and one of these is going to be for your local network, so you need to know which one that is. So in my case, ENP3S0 is my internal network, and this is my external network here, ENP4S0. And so once you have determined which one is which, we're going to then create bridges for each of these different network devices here. Now, in the context of ProxMox, a Linux bridge works kind of like a virtual switch does. It allows you to have different devices connect to that bridge. And those devices would be the network adapters that you install into your virtual machine. So the virtual network adapters that get assigned to a Linux bridge. And the Linux bridge allows the traffic from that virtual adapter to talk to not only the host physical adapter, but also other virtual adapters on other VMs on the same Linux bridge. So it kind of functions like a switch, although technically it's not a switch. Now, if you want a full-blown switch, you can install OVS, which is Open Virtual Switch, but for most people, that is not needed. You don't have to do that. There's nothing that requires you to use that for this particular setup. So a Linux bridge will work just fine. So to create a bridge, it's pretty straightforward. You can go to Create Bridge right here, Linux bridge, and it's going to pull up a bridge that looks like this. But for your LAN side, I'm going to show you my setup right here, which is called VMBR0. And then you tell it what bridge port you want to use, which is basically the name of the NIC that you want to be on your LAN side. So in my case, ENP3S0 is my bridge port. That's basically to plug it into the physical network and allow the traffic to flow out that way. And so that's all you need to put in here. And if you're using VLANs, check VLAN aware. And once you have that, click OK, and everything will be set up for that bridge. Now, for your external network, you need to also set up a bridge. And that one's pretty straightforward. Just create a Linux bridge. But in my case, I already did this. The only difference between this one and the other one is it's not VLAN aware. Now, if you're not using VLANs, both of them will be VLAN aware. But I am using VLAN, so I'm including that. And then you just make sure that the port matches the name of your external NIC, which is, in my case, ENP4S0. And once you're done with that, you have your bridges created. Now, well, there's one other thing that you might want to do. You don't have to do this, and that is to allow a machine on one of your virtual LANs to talk to ProxMox. And so all of my machines on all my devices on my network are on one of my many VLANs. I actually have 4 VLANs on, or 5 VLANs on my network. And the ones that are on VLAN 100 are the ones that I want to allow to talk to ProxMox. So to do that, I need to create a Linux VLAN instance that's going to be attached to a bridge on VLAN 100. So to do that, it's pretty straightforward. You just go to Linux VLAN and you put it in right here. Now there's a convention for this. You basically put in the name of the bridge that you want to use, and you can do VM BR0, and then you do dot, and then you put in the name, the ID of the VLAN. And that's a convention. And notice it parsed it right here for the raw device, which in my case is a Linux bridge, and then the VLAN tag that you're going to be using, which in my case is 100. Now, if you wanted to use 200, of course, you can put 200 in there. Now, you don't have to use the convention. You can name it something else, but you still have to put in the name of the raw device and the VLAN tag. In that case, you would just type it in rather than let it parse it. So you could put in VMBR0 and then put in the tag right there. But in my case, it looks like this, and it's VMBR0.100, and my VLAN tag is 100. And that's all you need to do. And then you need to put in the IP address with the CIDR block that it's in. So in my case, I'm going to be using 10.0.1.3 for the IP of ProxMox, and then it's on /24. That's the subnet it's on. And all of my other devices on that VLAN will be on the same subnet with a similar IP address. And you can put in a gateway right here. This would probably be the IP address of your pfSense instance, but you don't have to. That just means that it won't be able to reach out to the internet if you don't want ProxMox doing that, but you can if you want to. And you can also assign that at a later date. You can go back and edit it if you so choose. But in any case, this just allows me to talk to it from a machine on the network on the same VLAN, which in this case is the machine that I'm recording this video on. So once you have all of that configured, the network setup is done, and then you can basically apply the configuration right here. I didn't make any changes, but you hit apply configuration and it will reconfigure the network. Now, if you don't have a network connection to ProxMox, yeah, of course, you'll have to configure whatever machine that you connected to ProxMox with to be able to connect to this device as well. But usually that's just configuring an IP address and maybe a VLAN on the local device, or you can do this all on another device that is might be physically hardwired into a network as well. So once you have all of this figured out, you're ready to install pfSense. And pfSense installation is pretty straightforward. So let's hop over and talk about that. So the next thing we'll want to do is get pfSense. Now, you can get pfSense through the website pfSense.org, but you can also get it through a mirror, which basically allows you to download it using just a direct link without having to go through their shopping cart experience. So the way to do that is go to one of the mirrors. You can Google this, or I'll link to one in the video description down below that you can use. And you just grab the latest version, which in my case is pfSense CE 2.7.2 release AMD 64, and you just download the ISO. That's a GZ file. The other thing that you'll need to do is also grab 7-zip, because 7-zip will allow you to extract it. So just Google 7-zip and download 7-zip and install that. You can get the MSI, or you can get the standalone XE, whichever one suits your fancy. Download it and install that as well. So once you have it downloaded, you can then extract it. So after you've installed 7-zip, you can right-click on the file you downloaded, the ISO.gz. Go to more, go to 7-zip, and then open archive. You'll see it open up the ISO file right here, and then you can just simply drag that over onto the desktop, and it will extract the ISO. And so we're going to use the ISO here in just a second. So once we have that, now the next thing we need to do is upload this to our instance of ProxMox. So to upload this is pretty straightforward. Go to your data center, find the node you're going to install it on, the same one that you configure the network with, And then under the node, you should see this local storage right here. We're going to click on that and find ISO images, and you just simply upload it. I've already uploaded mine. So you just basically come over here, click upload and select the file, choose the file you want to upload, and then click upload. And it takes just a couple of seconds, depending on the speed of your local network to your instance of ProxMox. In any case, once it's there, you should see the ISO image, and now you're ready to install the virtual machine. So once we have the image uploaded, we're going to create the VM. The VM is actually really easy to do. We're going to come up here and click create VM, and we're going to choose our VM ID and to set up all of the various things here. So we're going to be putting on node ProxMox. I'm going to give it a name. I'm going to call it pfSense demo, and then click next. OS is going to be an other, and because this runs on an instance of FreeBSD, so you want to choose other and leave the version blank, and then choose pfSense ISO under the OS. And then on the next one for the system, you can take the defaults on this. There's nothing that we need to add to this. I mean, there's pretty much the defaults are fine. Unless you need a TPM for something, you don't need to add anything to it. Now for disks, this is where we're going to add in our disk. You can pretty much take the defaults on this as well. 32 gigs is more than enough for pfSense. Unless you're going to be doing a ton of logging and have a lot of additional features, 32 gigs is probably enough. You can use as small as 8 and be fine. So you can take the defaults here. And the CPU, I've been using 2 cores on pfSense. It depends on how much you have turned on with pfSense, all the features and functionality, and how much traffic and machines you are using with that. For my network, 2 seems to be fine. And I really never get beyond even 50% CPU utilization, even under a high network load. So it works fine. The other thing that you want to choose on this is to select the host for the type of CPU. So that basically matches the host CPU type to the VM CPU type. And that way the acceleration will be passed through on this. So you don't try to figure out which one to choose, and just choose host, and that's fine. Memory, 2 gigabytes is enough for this. Depends on the need of the modules you have installed with pfSense. The default is 2 gigs on ProxMox, and I've been using pfSense with 2 gigs for a number of years, and it's worked just fine. I've never seen it really swell beyond even 50% of memory utilization, even under high network utilization. So it works fine for that. Now, the next one, we want to add our first NIC to it, but we're going to add another one once this is kind of created. So we want to choose the bridge that is internal, which is, in my case, VMBR0. The model, we want to use VirtIO, and it's per virtualized. It just means that it's got better acceleration. Now we want to put it on the VLAN tag. If we're using VLANs, you can leave that blank if you're not. And then I'm going to uncheck firewall because pfSense is my firewall. And then click next. And then this is going to give you a confirmation, and then click finish. And that's going then to create the VM for you right here. And we're not quite done setting this up. We need to add a couple of different things to this. We need to add another NIC or 2 to it, depending on what your needs are. So we're going to come over here to hardware, and we're going to add in an additional NIC for the wide area network because we need at least 2. So we're going to add in a network device, and I'm going to put it on the external bridge, which in my case is VMBR2. And again, use VirtIO. I do not need VLAN tags, and I do not need the firewall. So I'm going to uncheck, leave the VLAN tag blank and uncheck firewall, then add that. Now I have 2 NICs on this, but if I have multiple VLANs, which is probably the case if you're going to be using VLANs, we're going to add a NIC per VLAN. So basically the same thing we did before with our initial adapter. We're going to use VMBR0. We're going to use VirtIO for the model. We're going to put in the VLAN tag, which is the case, whatever it might be, 200, 300, and so on, and then click add. And then you do that for each additional NIC that you're going to add to your machine. And mine looks something like this, where I have 5 VLANs and 1 externally facing NIC as well. So once you have all of that set up, you just click start and boot your machine. And this is going to then start installing pfSense on the machine. So to get access to the status, just go over here to the console, and this will connect to the installer. So you'll see the pfSense installer, depending on which one if you downloaded it from Netgate. You'll see it. The installer might look slightly different, but you basically just have an installer like this, and it just walks you through the install process, and it's going to install everything on the machine, and you just pretty much just take the defaults on all of this, and you can take the ZFF installation. It's going to basically just use all of the defaults on the machine, and it's then going to install the software, which is pretty straightforward. So just let it run, and once it's done, we'll come back and we'll show you how to basically set up the network using the console here, and then we'll go from there. Okay, the install is done. I'm going to reboot, and this will reboot the virtual machine. So once you get to this, you will see a question that's going to ask you about VLANs. No, you don't need VLANs once you're in pfSense. Now, this is where some of the confusion might happen. The VLANs are handled by ProxMox. They're not handled by pfSense. So you can skip the VLAN configuration inside of pfSense. All the VLAN tagging and untagging actually is going to happen on ProxMox itself. So if a packet is tagged, it's going to remove the tag using ProxMox and then forward that onto the virtual machine. And then if a packet comes off of the virtual machine, it's going to then add the tag to the packet and then send it onto the VLAN. So you do not have to configure VLANs on pfSense. The only thing that you need to do on pfSense then is just configure your network according to which adapters you're going to be assigning to the WAN and then the local network. So in the case of this one, you should see the actual MAC addresses for each of the various adapters you have. So you want to make sure that these match. So now the way you can get this is you can go over to the hardware for your device and see which MAC address is going to be for your wide area network, which in my case is the one that ends in 9B, and the one that ends in DE is the one for my local network. And then I might have an alternative network that is 3.0. So coming back over here to the console, I'm going to use VTNet for my wide network, for my wide area network. That is going to be 9B. And so I'm going to type in VTNet2. That is going to be, or VTNet1 for 9B. And then the WAN is going to be VTNet0. And so this is going to be VTNet0 for the local firewall NAT. And then the actual optional network is going to be VTNet2. And that will assign it to whatever additional networks I'm going to have. So you should see something that looks like this, where you have the WAN configured to whatever adapters appropriate for your WAN, and then one for your LAN, and then one for your optional network, and then yes to proceed. And that is then going to attempt to configure everything. Now, given that this is kind of a demo, it's going to say manual intervention and so on required here. But in any case, once you're done with this, you should be able to work with the actual instance of pfSense. So I'm going to shut this VM down, and you should get a menu that looks something like this. And so this is the default menu. Once everything's configured, you should see your instance look like this, where you have the wide area network configured with an IP grabbed from your ISP or whatever you're using for your external side. And then you have all of your various networks configured with different IP addresses. So once you're in this, we'll need to assign the IP addresses. It's going to use some defaults right here. So because the wide area network is the one that we need to configure for DHCP, it's going to use, you can select IPv4, select and so on. And so I'm not going to reconfigure this, but you'd use this option 2 to set the DHCP for the wide area network, and then you would assign a static IP for the VTNet 1 in my case, or whatever your LAN adapter is for your instance of pfSense. And that's just going to be the address that you should be able to connect to from a host on your machine. And so this one should be whatever your VLAN is. Now, mine are configured basically because I renamed these inside of pfSense. So once you're configured, then you should be able to connect to your instance of pfSense on whatever device that you're using on the same VLAN that is going to be for your network. So in my case, it looks something like this. If you haven't logged in, you will get a login prompt for the first time. You'll be asked to put in the default password, which is pfSense. You put in admin pfSense and you're logged in, and then it'll have a prompt to say, hey, change your password. And then you'll change your password. Now, the interface, now once you're logged in, you can kind of fine tune this a little bit more. So in my case, I changed the network. I changed the names of my adapters here. So if you click on any one of the adapters, you can rename them. So I gave mine a descriptive name. So VLAN 100 main. That's my main network for my trusted devices. Then I have my guest network and my work network. That's kind of for other things that I do that aren't necessarily related to my main network. I have my IoT network for like cameras and stuff. Then I have a DMZ network, which is like for not a physical network, but I use it for different things for just running servers and stuff that I don't want on any of these other networks. So depends on what you're doing. You'll end up with something that looks like this. So each one of these is mapped to a different VLAN over on ProxMox. So in my case, if we go back to pfSense right here and look at my hardware, this is where the tags are. So B7 right here, if we look over at pfSense, B7 is the VLAN 100. And so that I just named it using descriptions. I'm not using VLANs here on pfSense. Again, you don't have to configure it once you're configured it in ProxMox. So it does all the tagging and untagging for you on your packets. So once you have this, all you need to do is then set up your firewall to your liking, which could have any number of different options turned on. So by default, it's going to set up your main network to have DHCP configured and NAT and all that stuff. And then you'll have your wide area network configured for all that. And then your different interfaces will have the ability to set up NAT and DHCP on each one of those. So you can go over here to your DHCP server and then click on each one of your networks and enable DHCP on each one of those and so on for each network.
If you like this content, please consider subscribing to the channel by clicking on the subscribe button. You can also like this content by clicking on the thumbs up or share this content with your friends, and also comment in the comment section down below. You can also find me online at www.blaze.net or on Twitter at @TheOneMule. And as always, thanks for watching.